there, welcome to our videos here as we work through the book of Isaiah, the last section in Isaiah anyway. We've got 2 weeks left. This is week 5 of 6, and we're getting into some really, really interesting parts.
Yeah, we are.
I love some of this stuff. And so we're in chapters, well, this week 55, 58, 59, 60, and 61.
Yeah, a lot to read.
A lot to read.
Yeah, but with each chapter, we're not necessarily reading the full chapters in there.
Or
are we on these?
These last couple weeks, I think we're reading most of the, if not all of them.
Yeah.
But we are still skipping a little bit because it's either really heavily toward Israel or some judgments or whatever. And
right, we're trying to move the story along, especially from a Christian standpoint.
Yeah. Which right. and one of the things, an overarching principle to remember, especially in these last 2 weeks, is not to read ourselves too much into the passages, right?
That's a great reminder, especially for me, because I want everything to be about me.
Right. Well, the church wasn't going to exist for another 700 years.
Right.
By when Isaiah was writing, so there was no concept of the church. But there are a ton of principles about God, a ton of principles about Israel. God hasn't written off Israel. Romans 11, God hasn't written off Israel. So there's a lot of prophecy yet to happen. So even if there's not something in our application that we can do about this is definitely stuff we should know. It should change. It should affect our worldview. It should.
Right. And like you said, though, there's also concepts that we can take, even though it applies. It was said to Israel. Yeah. It still makes sense for us too.
Right. So there's both a primary application to the original audience, but then there's so how much, if any, can we apply today? Right. And so those are the things. Hopefully, these are the things that these videos help us work through.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it then, right? So for a long time, we've been talking about prophecy that Babylon would come in and would crush Israel, and a remnant would be taken back. A remnant of the people would be taken back to Babylon, and then at some point, God would come and rescue Israel, right, and bring everyone back, or the remaining people that were back. And last week we got a great view of the Messiah, and there was some awesome things in there, and I loved that it said. He had no stately form or majesty that might catch our attention. He was kind of bland. Yeah. And I was kind of thinking about it this week from the standpoint of the description of Satan was exactly the opposite, where he was the most beautiful. Yeah. And, he was the shiny thing. So now Jesus is coming as the dull coin, and
very interesting.
I have no idea if that's anything, but there's some symbolism there that I thought was kind of cool.
Neat.
Yeah. And of course, John called Jesus the Word, and, the Word is what's coming out and what he's saying. But this week the tone changes, and this week the tone changes to when you come back to me. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an awesome thing. God is saying, look, I gave you so many chances, so many choices. You didn't take any of them. This bad stuff is going to happen, but when you come back to me, so they know at some point they are going to come back, even though that doesn't make it easier for the people that are actually involved in there. Right. But God does say, when you come back to me, I'm going to make an unconditional covenant with you. Right. And I think that's awesome. And we find some words in here or verses in here that we see that are common. Your ways are not like my ways, or my ways are not like your ways. My deeds are not like your deeds. God's plans are better than our plans. Stuff that Christians have been saying to other Christians for years. Here's where we got it from.
Yeah, Isaiah 55, right? A lot of
Yeah. I love some what I think are some practical things in here. God is talking to Israel. Hey, when you fast, you're doing it wrong. And here's what you're doing wrong, and we have talked about it before when we were going through the New Testament, where the Pharisees or the Sadducees, when they're fasting, it's all about the fasting and telling people, I'm fasting. And God is saying, hey, you're not doing it right. Here's the whole idea. And he lays out one of the purposes, at least, of fasting.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think he does the same thing with the Sabbath and observing the Sabbath. And I really love that there's a line in there about, and this is my version of it. You're doing it right when you're excited about the Sabbath, when the Sabbath isn't a burden, and it's you're looking forward to it, and it's a mind changer and a heart change, and it's awesome.
It's really about the attitude, not the action.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we, of course, as humans, make it about the action,
right?
Because if I do this, I'm good, which means you got to do it twice.
Yeah,
because we got to one up each other,
right?
Yeah, chapter 59, God reminds Israel why they got in trouble in the first place. We kind of talked about that. Chapter 60, we're getting into a future state, and we got to figure out, is this? We know this was written 700 years before Jesus came, so it's going to be future. But how future is it?
Yeah,
and that can be kind of fun. And then chapter 61 is about the remnant actually returning back, and that they're going to rebuild and they're going to repopulate, and just how big Israel's going to be. I think this is where it says, you're not going to have enough room, for everyone.
Yeah, which is obviously still future, because a lot of this stuff, now we're looking 2,700 years in the past, and this stuff hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, not all of it, right?
Yeah,
they came back,
right?
But so it's where's that division, right? Where's that line?
They've been occupied since they came back to the land.
Yeah,
Israel's been occupied. They were still under Persian, then under Greece, then under Rome, and then under British, and under they've just constantly been occupied. Even since 1948, they haven't been.
I was going to say
free like the way
because they're still part of the land that is not returned to them. Is that?
Yeah, in from 1948, and then of course we see in the 6 Days War, and just every war, they've continually given up land. The proposed two-state solutions that we're seeing in modern day is always about them giving up. And that's not how God says there's going to be too many of you for your land, because you're giving away land.
Yeah, right. If you reduce it down,
there's not enough. He says, I'm going to give you so much more, and you're still not going to be able to fit.
Right.
It hasn't happened yet. It still has to be future.
Yeah. So what else are you seeing in here in this week?
Well, there's time.
Knowing that we have limited time.
Yeah, right. Okay, let's see. So chapter 55, like you said, is this general call. It's specific to Israel, of course, but a lot of this stuff is still general. Is the same message that we give today. All who are thirsty, come drink from the living water. Why pay for something that will not nourish you? Why spend your hard-earned money? Grace is a gift.
I love that.
Right? Let's see here.
Sorry to interrupt you. And I think that's one of those things that we can take as a principle today.
Yeah.
Why spend money on things that are wasteful?
Oh yeah.
From the standpoint of where's your heart, where's your money?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's talking about it from a deliverance standpoint, but the broader principle, you're right, is we waste
about me
more
versus
stuff. Yeah, it's true. Seek the Lord while He makes Himself available, or the older translation, seek the Lord while He may be found. Right. Call to Him while He's nearby. Just so much really, really good stuff that even though it was originally directed to Israel and their initial return, this is the same stuff that we're preaching today. Right. The same general principles. In chapter 58 is where you were talking about fasting and the Sabbath and stuff. And this is one of those places where modern churches tend to say, this is what the church is supposed to do, right? This is the kind of fast I want. Verse 6, I want you to remove the sinful chains and tear away the ropes of burdensome yoke, and to set free the oppressed. Break every burdensome yoke. I want you to share your food with the hungry and provide shelter to the homeless, oppressed people. When you see someone naked, clothe them. And it's like, okay, this is what the church is supposed to be doing for the world.
Right. It's easy to think that.
Right. And churches, there are churches that preach and teach this. But the end of verse 7, don't turn your back on your own flesh and blood. This was not the church or Israel is supposed to, clothe or feed or whatever the whole world. These were commands under the Mosaic law, how Israel was supposed to take care of itself. And they had stopped, right? They had stopped taking care even of their own nation, much less anyone else. And God wasn't saying, go feed the world, go clothe the world, go, whatever. He was saying, get back to what I told you to do.
Right. So is this also the northern kingdom, southern kingdom kind of deal?
At this point, they're really coming back combined. That split once the exile happened.
Yeah.
You get 12 tribes back together again. And
okay.
So, so that's that one. Let's see here. It says, chapter 59, verse 16. He sees that this is talking about God. He sees there is no advocate. He's shocked that no one intervenes. There's obviously some hyperbole going on there. God doesn't get shocked at anything. So he takes matters into his own hands. His desire for justice drives him on. Now check this out, verse 17. He wears his desire for justice like body armor. And his desire to deliver. Now that word deliver is often translated save or rescue, right? His desire to deliver is like a helmet on his head.
So you got the body armor, you got the helmet.
Helmet of salvation, the helmet of deliverance. Does that sound familiar to anybody? This is what Paul was thinking when he wrote in Ephesians 6 about the armor of God. Remember, it's not the Christian's armor. This isn't our armor that we pick up and put on. This is the armor of God that he puts on and fights battles for us, and we rest in him and we submit to him. James 4 says, submit to God, and then resist the devil and he'll flee from you. Not go out and fight the devil. So that was one of those things I wanted to point out in case you missed it. We've talked about the future versus, how far in the future versus, whatever. Chapter 60, 61 absolutely has to be even further out than what we are now. And this is important because especially this week and next week, as we go through some of these eschatology, these prophetic passages, Isaiah didn't know anything about 1,000-year reign, the millennium. Okay, yeah. We don't even know about that until Revelation 20.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So he sees the eternal kingdom. He sees the promises of the kingdom, and he sees the new heaven and the new earth in eternity, and he sees it all as one thing. And so we're reading here thinking, well, that sounds like the millennium. Well, that sounds like eternity. He didn't see a difference. It's just something that he had never been told.
Right.
So we've got to be careful as we do that. One last thing, and I know I've got a lot here. One last thing, but chapter 61, verse 3. Oh, verses 1 through 3. Jesus is reading when he goes to Nazareth and he reads the scroll in the synagogue. He only gets halfway through verse 2. Actually, most of the way through verse 1, really, because he never gets to the point where he says, "Now I am announcing the year of the Lord's favor," because that part hasn't happened yet. That wasn't part of his first advent. Okay, but just verse 3, to strengthen those who mourn in Zion by giving them a turban instead of ashes, oil symbolizing joy instead of mourning, a garment symbolizing praise instead of discouragement. Here we go. They will be called oaks of righteousness, trees planted by the Lord to reveal his splendor for his own glory. This is one of two verses where we get our church's name, Oak Tree Community Church, because we want to be oaks of righteousness. I know it's directed toward Israel, but that name in there, that concept, oaks of righteousness planted by the Lord for his own glory. And this was one of the verses that brought us to this concept of that's what we want to be. Oak trees can grow old and mature and last for a long time. Right. Oak trees were one of those things that you saw on ancient maps.
Yeah, isn't that awesome?
It's an oak tree
because
or
it was there for so long. Yeah.
It's there for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And if you find the oak tree, you can find your way. And that was one of those things that really really stood out to us when we were thinking about the name. So
Yeah, great. I think that's a great place to stop.
you just don't want to talk anymore.
No, it's not. It's not that at all. It's let's just leave it there as the last thought. Too.
Okay. All right. Well, this is this is about getting into the Bible and seeing some of these applications and where we get some of this stuff from, right? So we've seen a lot of connections. So what are the things that you see? Put them in the comments below. Let us know. Text, email,
Yeah, we've gotten a couple.
Yeah.
Yeah. As we plead for them.
We really like to hear from you, and we hope these are beneficial. And we will see you next week as we finish 62 through 66.